When two young artists decide to make a funny piece of art, they have no idea they may have actually sculpted the true form of a dark spirit. And then we travel up to Alaska to take a look at the story of a tribe of natives living in the early 1800s. But when they see a silvery disc fly overhead, they have no idea they're about to have a close encounter of the kind. Today on Dead Rabbit Radio. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Dead Rabbit Radio. I'm your host, Jason Carpenter. I'm having a great day. I hope you guys are having a great day too. I hope you guys are having tons of fun doing whatever you're doing. I hope you guys are staying cool during this heat. How long is this heat wave supposed to go on for, by the way? Hopefully it's the end of the week and then we're done with it. But who knows? Things are getting kind of crazy. But someone who's crazy no matter what the weather is, someone who likes to have their feathers ruffled and their armpits tickled, I'm assuming it doesn't. I hate being tickled, but this guy might like it. Walking into Dead Rabbit Radio Command, everyone get on your feet and give it up for Dingo Flamingo. Woohoo, yeah, wee! Yeah, walking on in, showing off them feathers. Dingo Flamingo is a new member of our Patreon, and he's back. He was just in yesterday's episode that went too long. So, Dingo Flamingo, you're going to be our captain, our pilot this episode. You guys can't support the show financially. I totally understand. I really do. I really, really do. Just help spread the word about Dead Rabbit Radio. That helps out so much. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell everyone you know. Dead Rabbit Radio is your favorite paranormal show. Okay, Dingo, let's go ahead and get this party started. I'm going to toss you the keys. Catch them in your black beak. I'm going to toss you the keys to the Jason Jalopy. Everyone climb on board this rickety old car. We're leaving behind Dead Rabbit Radio Command. Drive us all the way out to an ordinary house in an ordinary neighborhood. Taking a ride in this chitty chitty bang bang car, headed all the way out here. First off, I gotta give a shout out to the last 747, the last 47. The last 747 sent me over this story. Really, really appreciate it. He's been doing a lot of good stuff, finding stories for the show, so I really appreciate that. Really do. We're headed all the way out to this ordinary house. We're about to meet two people. We don't have their real names. We'll call the narrator, the person who wrote this up, Amanda, and we're going to meet her friend Sam. One day they're over at Amanda's house hanging out, and they're like, you know what, man, it's kind of boring. It's kind of boring just sitting here. We could play these video games. We could play this state-of-the-art video game. Says, nah, that's lame. No one ever said. And then they go, well, you know, we could read a book together. That is lame. That is lame. I will say, if you ever find yourself sitting in a room and with someone you're reading the same book, right? I don't know if anyone's ever done that, but that sounds totally boring. Plus, also, if they're a faster reader than you, they're like, ooh, that's gotta sting. And you're like, what? You're reading the book, and then you turn the page, you're like, oh, that must have been what they were talking about. A guy getting decapitated. It's a French Revolution book. They're like, the other person's like, ooh, bad news for you, Jean Claire. And you're like, what? Someone's reading the book faster than you. Do people do this? I don't know. I'm not a big book reader. I read a lot of magazines and articles. And every time I have read a book, it's been by myself, just me reading the book. But who knows, man? There might be, maybe that's some weird sort of book club thing. People sit around and read the same book at the same time. Ooh, watch out. It's coming for you. Shut up. Let me read this book. Anyway. Getting aggravated about something that probably doesn't even exist. They can't find anything to do, so Amanda and Sam said, you know what we should do? Let's make a head. Let's make a head out of clay. Fantastic idea, Amanda. He's putting his two copies of the same book behind him. He's like, oh, I thought we were going to read Where the Red Fern Grows together. But, you know, I guess making a ceramic head's kind of cool. They start making this head out of clay. Amanda said we were really goofing off. We were just having fun with this, and they make this head, and it looks like a normal human head. They've made this head, it kind of looks like paper mache, but whatever, and when they went to, design it, they're like, oh, dude, wouldn't it be hilarious to give him bloodshot eyes. Oh, yeah, that'd be awesome, drawing the bloodshot on him. And then like, oh, we should make his lips, however you would describe that. We should make his lips. Give him lips. Give him like little red lips. Oh, yeah, Amanda, you're so smart. That's such a good idea. And they're drawing this. They're making these designs on the head. And they thought it was funny. They're goofing off. It's kind of exaggerated features. It does look a little creepy. For me, the creepiest part is kind of like the cracked face, the cracked facade. But you have all those little dots on the head, which I'm assuming is like hair plugs or where hair is going to come in at some point. And then there's that little curlicue hair on its forehead. They made it, and they're laughing about it. And then, once they finished it, they started to go, this guy's kind of creeping us out. This guy's kind of creepy. But whatever. Whatever. We just created this thing. It's a little off-putting, but it's probably the eyes. It's probably the lips. No biggie. Well, 2 days after they created this clay head, Amanda has a dream. Or, more likely, better put, a nightmare. She's in this room. And she sees the head sitting there on the dresser. And she's like, what? Oh, man. The head starts disappearing and then reappearing around the room. The head's actually moving in her dream, and it's getting closer to her. So it's not the most intense dream, but it's definitely, like, odd. How often do artists dream about their artwork? Did Leonardo da Vinci, like, wake up one night and be like, I was being chased by a helicopter down the stairs? No, probably not, right? Who's that guy who painted the Sistine Chapel? That dude? He's like having dreams. God keeps trying to poke him. He's like running through an infinite hallway. This giant finger's coming after him. Man, I sure wish I had one of Leonardo da Vinci's helicopters right now and make this escape much easier. People don't normally dream about their art, I would imagine. She did. She had this dream about 2 nights after it was created of this head kind of disappearing, reappearing in this room, chasing her. Not necessarily chasing her, but getting closer. Well, the next day, when she wakes up from that, she's like, oh man, that was a horrible dream. She wakes up and she's talking to Sam, and she goes, dude, you remember that head we made that's just kind of sitting in my house? I had a dream last night that I was in this room with the head, and it kept disappearing and reappearing and getting closer to me. It's creepy. I don't know why I'm having nightmares about that dumb head we made. And Sam's looking at her, and Sam goes, Amanda, I had that exact same dream last night. I dreamt I was in a room. And the head kept getting closer and closer to me. So, when you have a cursed object like this, what's the best course of action? You may think, I should destroy it, but that could actually make it worse. Because whatever it contains, you may release it. You could keep it and bury it somewhere or try to contain it somewhere. Amanda comes up with the probably the most selfish of the options. She takes it to her mom's house. She goes, hey mom, do you mind if I put this box? She doesn't even show it to her mom. She has a box that's all wrapped up. It says, warning, may be cursed. She's like, hey mom, can I put this sculpted head in your house for a while? It probably didn't tell her it was cursed. Probably didn't tell her about the nightmares. And the mom's like, yeah, of course. So she puts it in her mom's house, and it's at mom's house for a while. And then, after a certain amount of time, we don't know exactly how long it is, Amanda goes back to the mom's house to pick up the sculpted head. And when she's there, her family members start telling her, dude, you know what's really weird? There's been some crazy activity happening here. And I was like, what are you talking about? And they go, well, every so often, like, we'll be sitting here, like, eating dinner in the kitchen, and all of a sudden we'll hear a door upstairs slam shut. Like, they hadn't had any haunted activity, nothing that you would even classify as maybe paranormal. You would hear a door upstairs slam shut. Amanda's brother, who was there, goes, yeah, the door slamming shut's weird. There's something happened to me, too. The other day, I left my bedroom to go do some laundry. I went to the laundry room, and when I came back to my bedroom, my door was locked. And I didn't lock my door at all. I got locked out of my own room. Her family members are saying they've seen, like, flickering lights there Flickering lights in the house. So these are things that they didn't have prior to the head showing up. Now, I don't know if her family actually keyed in saying, hey, this all started around the same time you brought that head over here. Or if they were just kind of telling her, yeah, recently we've been having this stuff. But at this point, Amanda believes that the head may be cursed. She goes, listen, it could totally be coincidence. All this stuff is happening. My brother is kind of a dummy. It's also possible that we accidentally created something. We accidentally created this head. Now, she has removed this post. So we have it archived. She posted this underneath the name Otherwise Bed 762. And she goes, I just don't know what to do. Which is, like I said earlier, something you have to consider when it comes to cursed items. Because you don't want to destroy them. Because you don't actually know what's going on. You don't want to necessarily give them away. If it's cursed, I told that story a long time ago about the cursed basketball that I found. I think it was cursed. Again, like Amanda, I go, I don't know if it was a coincidence. I don't know if it's because I took this basketball from somebody's yard. I mean, listen, it was on the sidewalk. It wasn't on their property. I saw this basketball sitting there, so I dribbled it on home. And then I just ran afoul of some really bad luck. Like, really bad stuff was happening to me. But I didn't want to pop it. I didn't want to destroy it, so one day, I was carrying it down the street. I knew what I was going to do. I mean, this is totally premeditated. I won't say it was accidental, but I walked by a local school and chucked it over the fence. I go, this is the school's problem now. I'm not worried about it. Maybe some kid will be playing basketball and stub his toe or something. I don't know. Maybe it was a coincidence. And tossed it over the fence of a school. You can run across these things. The question always is how do you get rid of them? And I would always argue getting rid of them. She's all checking this head over the fence of a school. No, I mean, like, that fit, right? It was a basketball. Someone's going to play basketball with it. If you chucked over a ceramic head, that's probably not going to work. It's probably going to shatter. You could bury it. You could give it away to someone who is like a paranormal investigator. I wouldn't want it, right? I don't think I would want it. I try not to invite too many curses into my house, cursed objects. But, yeah, I think probably the safest thing is to safely remove it from your area, which is either giving it to someone or taking it somewhere and burying it. But the thing is like, yeah, the cursed basketball, that's kind of ridiculous. Probably because I stole it, right? It's probably some ghost kid's basketball at that house. He's all yelling out the window, no, that's my ball, I'm all dribbling it down the street with a big smile on my face. Is it cursed, though? This is what we were talking about yesterday when I went on about a spooky YouTube video I saw. That's pretty much what it was, I have to admit it. And ended up having a nightmare. I'm going to talk to that girl later today and see if I can get some follow-up. But anyways, that was all on yesterday's episode. This was the same thing. Amanda and Sam didn't set out to make a cursed object. They didn't even set out to make a creepy object. If we believe their narrative, they just were having fun making this. But they created something that not only creeped them out, which you can do that accidentally, but may actually be cursed. I thought it was really interesting. One of the people replying to this post, user XPS012, I hadn't thought about this. This is actually really interesting. He says you guys might have accidentally made something that actually looked similar to a local spirit. You also could argue that if the house that she was at when they made this is different than the mother's house, did have some sort of ghost, they could have had a hand in the decisions that Amanda and Sam were making as they made it. They could have 100% accidentally made something that was close to a local spirit, or the spirit could have been subconsciously guiding their hands. Not like physically, but just giving them ideas. Oh yeah, make the lips kind of red, but black too, just like mine. Whispering into their brain type of thing. So it's possible that that's why this thing is cursed. It's not... If they had made this head at another location, it would just be a ceramic head that looked a little weird. But because they did it where there may be a ghost nearby that looks like this thing, it's now infused with that spirit. Maybe the ghost helped encourage certain details. Maybe they did it accidentally. I thought that was a really interesting scenario. And I kind of talked about that on yesterday's episode too. I go, you could go to shoot a spooky movie and you have no intention of it being cursed. The location you pick is haunted. And you don't see the ghost, you don't hear the ghost, there's no EVPs or weird shadows or anything like that, but that spirit still lingers on that film. This is kind of that same thing where you can have the spirit nearby infuse itself into this object. User XPS said they actually had a friend who did something kind of similar. One day they were drawing a picture. And they wanted to make it like this ugly, creepy drawing. They gave the drawing 4 eyes. And they started having nightmares. They started having these weird dreams connected to that drawing. So he goes, that happened to a friend of mine. They just threw it out. He goes, they actually took it to the dump, which is another way you could do it. But again, like, that could really depend on the spirit or how cursed it is. That you throw it, you cover it in a can of raviolis and a bunch of banana peels. It might actually be madder than if you just had it sitting in your house and it's sitting in your garbage can for like 3 or 4 days. You're not going to have a good time. So there you go. You got the story of a cursed head, possible cursed head. We don't know what they did with it. They ended up taking down the post. Hopefully they're safe. I guess I could message them, but then it's like, no, everything is safe. Send more clay. I was like, what? Hopefully she's safe. Hopefully she hasn't been possessed by the clay man. Dingo Flamingo, let's go ahead and toss you the keys to the world-famous carpenter copter. We're leaving behind this house. Fly us all the way out to Alaska. Specifically, we're headed to Koyuk, Alaska. It's the early 1800s. We think 1800 to 1805, somewhere around there. And there's a little Inuit village. Maybe it's not little. Maybe it's big. Maybe it's a sprawling metropolis of a village. But we're in an Inuit village in Koyuk, Alaska. People are walking around and they're like, hey, Chuck, did you scavenge any of those berries the other day? The guy's like, I did. I walked 400 miles to get these. There's no berries in Alaska. We eat fish, but because of you, Joe, I wanted to get you some berries. Here you go. They're eating raspberries. They're like, these are delicious. They're eating these berries. People are going about their business. Some dude's carrying a couple buckets of water. One guy has a sheep. They're like, where did you get this stuff from? He's like, I don't know, man. I just wandered for about, 5 or 6 weeks. Found a place full of these things. The grass is green. The sky's blue. And there's a bunch of these white fluffy things. They're pretty cool. I rode it back. I put a little saddle on it. I rode it back. It's just 5 or 6 weeks walk away. It's pretty cool. So while they're all discussing village life, someone goes, Guys, what? What's that? And everyone looks up and they see this silver disc flying through the sky. And they're pointing at it. They're like, what in the world is that? It's pretty cool looking. It's flying. It's silver. And they're like, guys, it's coming. It's coming this way. It lands, and then the little steam shooting out of it, and you're like, wow, is that like the exhaust? Nope. You see the front door of this thing open, and these guys start walking out of it, and they're all pushing the steam away. They're walking out of this UFO, and they look. The villagers look, and they see 3 little men standing outside this UFO, and the little men are just kind of looking at their vehicle and kind of shaking their heads. They're like, oh, the other little alien, and they look human. They're not gray aliens. They're actually just 3 short, human-looking dudes. They start discussing. So you're gonna do the whole episode like this? They say. So what happened was, basically just that. This silvery disc came out of the sky, and it landed somewhere near this village, and these 3 little dudes walked out. And of course the villagers were terrified. The Inuit tribe, they're like, what in the world? You don't know what an alien is. You don't know what a UFO is. But you know what should and shouldn't be. You shouldn't have stuff flying around. It's not a bird. Those guys are really, really tiny. That seems odd as well. They're probably like 2 feet tall, right? Probably about the size of a kid, 2 to 3 feet tall. That's weird. To be fair, that's less weird than the UFO. I mean, you're not going to write in your journal if you were walking down the street today and you saw a 3-foot tall guy. You'd be like, whatever. But you see the silvery disc, which I would argue, too, did people in certain parts of the world even know what the color silver looked like? Because that's such a specific type of gray. Everything would seem so bizarre about this, and this UFO, which you don't know the words for it, you know it shouldn't be, lands near your village. And these 3 little dudes get out, and they're kind of looking around their UFO, and they're just like, no. And they walk back on the UFO, but it doesn't take back off. So villagers are like, dude, what are we going to do about that? Like, is there anything we need to do about that? Would be the first question. Like, let's just assume, the tribal chief is like, guys, listen, this is a little bit outside of my pay grade. We will assume that they are friendly until we know otherwise. Because we don't know anything about them. So they do actually keep their distance. Both the Inuit tribe and these 3 men kind of keep their distance for quite a while. But they also don't ignore each other. Over time, the Inuit start to see that despite these guys' stature, these 3 little men's stature, they're incredibly strong. They would watch one of them pick up a log and carry it around. And they're like, okay, well, so it's probably a good idea we didn't attack them, because none of us can do that. It would take 10 of us to pick up that log. They watch this little guy pick up a log, and he's like just walking around with it. They'd also see one of these guys, they could pick up an entire dead deer by themselves. Which I'd argue is a little less impressive. I would argue that I've never picked up a dead deer. I'm sure they weigh like 300-400 pounds. But they could pick up a dead deer by themselves. Now, again, so these guys are hunting in the area. They're logging. These 3 little guys are kind of making a home here. They're finding food. They have access to the water that they need. Or they need wood for either shelter or fire, what have you. The silver disc is still there, but they're kind of making the best of the situation that they can. The members of the Inuit tribe are watching this, and they're like, well, I mean, they're not hurting us. The deer did look delicious. I wish I had gotten it. I wish I had shot it. But over time, these 3 guys start to interact more with the tribe. The natives are like, wait, what did he say? I don't know. And then the little guy's like pointing at a deer hoof. He is holding a deer hoof. And he's like, meenu boop boop. He's handing it to the natives. And the natives are like, I think he wants us to have this. Oh, yeah, sure. We'll take this deer hoof. And then the little guy walked away. I'm like, oh, that's... just throw it away. It's a rotted deer hoof. They're like, oh, maybe that's where he comes from. Maybe this is a delicacy. I'm not going to find out. They start interacting with each other, and over time, these 3 little men learned the language of the Inuits. So they'd walk up and they'd be like, hey, Charlie, do you got any more of those raspberries? And they're like, yep, just came back from another expedition, my man, my little man. Here you go. Here's a handful of raspberries. Nom, nom, nom. And the alien pulls out a bag of rotted deer hooves. He goes, here's payment, good sir. The best deer hooves in the area. The little man walks away. They're like, we got to teach these guys how the bartering system works. It's supposed to be stuff we want. What are we going to do? People have houses made out of rotting deer hooves at this point. They're like, what else are we going to do with them? Over time, they end up learning the language. The humans don't learn the alien language, but the aliens learn the human language. And they say, our ship broke. We are flying around, and there's something wrong with it. It had this malfunction. We had to make an emergency landing. The problem is that the only way we know how to repair it, we don't have access to any of those tools. We have access to none of the tech that we need to fix it. So we're stuck here. Like, thanks. I'm glad we landed near such a cool group of people. They're lucky they landed at this tribe because the tribe was like, they can't help them. They can't go and repair the ship, but they didn't attack them. They didn't run them off. They just kind of lived together as neighbors. And this all started in 1800, 1805, somewhere around there. Now we're in the year 1910. So over 100 years later, there were still reports at that time of the three little men living in the area. Everybody knew who they were. For the past 105, 110 years, these guys were still interacting with this same tribe in Koyuk, Alaska. The reason why we know about this story is there is a woman in Alaska named Lois Foster. She told this story in 1990 to a Fortean researcher, a paranormal researcher named Mark Chorvinsky. Lois said, my grandmother was a member of that tribe. My grandmother grew up in that tribe, and she knew these guys. She knew of them. She saw them. Lois says, my grandma, in 1913, was a child in that tribe, and in 1913, she saw these three guys, and she goes, they were old now. They were actually starting to look old. But that means for 105, 110 years, which shows that the aliens were aging, but they were aging so slowly, they had to be there for over 100 years before they actually started to look old. So whoever these guys were, very young, they had a UFO. It wasn't the best UFO, it did break down, but Lois's grandmother knew these dudes in this tribe because she grew up there. And by the year 1913, they were starting to look old. They were starting to look a little elderly. What's interesting is I found this story on thinkaboutitdocs.com, which is a great resource for UFO enthusiasts. They cover a lot of humanoid contacts as well, which is what I like. It's cool, UFO stories, UFO lights in the sky, stuff like that's cool. But to tell a story about it, I like to have these humanoid stories, the actual meeting these other beings, and the website's great for both of that. They got it from an article written by Mark Chorvinsky called Our Strange World. That was published in 1990 in Fate magazine. What's interesting, too, is that, when you have stories like this, you want to see what can you verify. It's not like you can go out there. Well, that would be cool. I was about to say you can't go out there and see the remains of the ship. Maybe if you knew where you were looking. I'm assuming at this point the ship's been stripped for parts, but who knows? You might be able to find some piece of evidence. People have looked into this story over the years, because it's quite fascinating, and it really has a couple really neat angles we can look at. But people have looked into the story over the years. They found out that Lois Foster is real. They found out that that was not an invention. She was real. She lives up in that area of Alaska. There's an article about her in the Quad City Herald newspaper, which is a local newspaper, on December 3rd, 1976, where she was talking about Eskimo Christmas celebrations. Because she's Eskimo. Her family comes from these Inuit tribes. It's funny because the researcher goes, well, there was that article in 1976 in the newspaper, but she didn't mention the UFO and the tiny people, so the story might be suspect. I would argue probably aren't going to bring it up. You're probably not going to bring it up, especially in 1976. Someone's interviewing you about Christmas celebrations. You're like, the best Christmas ever was when the UFO crashed and the three tiny men came out. They'd be like, what? There is a huge difference between UFO research and we've talked about this 100 times on the show, but I like to repeat it because I know the age range for this show is quite wide. There's a huge difference between UFO stories being reported in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s than it is from the 90s, the 2000s, and forward. Now, if you're in a particular industry like a pilot or the military or police officer, it's very hard to come forward because you look like a crank. And nobody wants to be sitting in a cockpit next to someone who believes in little green men. No one wants to have a cop who's supposed to back them up during a drug bust if you think your cop believes that he got abducted by aliens one day. But that used to be the same with everybody. It didn't matter who you were. If you admitted that you had seen a UFO or, heaven forbid, saw an alien, you'd be laughed out of your community. You'd be the local butcher. And people would be like, dude, that guy, he's nuts. He thinks aliens abducted him. So people want to talk about this stuff. It wouldn't make sense that someone would be more willing to talk about it in 1990 than 1976. This is interesting because we've covered a story like this before, but it had a much worse ending. I'll put the episode in the show notes and I'll kind of give you a quick overview. I believe it was in the Pacific Northwest or the western portion of Canada. There was a researcher who was researching native tribes in the area back when the tribes were still big, strong. They had these footholds. This is before massive westward expansion from the United States. He was out here and he was investigating these tribes, basically like an anthropologist working with tribes at that time. And he found a tribe that had a ton of copper. And a lot of their jewelry and a lot of their decorations were made of copper. And they knew how to manipulate copper, which was unprecedented for a Western tribe. There were tribes out by the Great Lakes that had easy access to copper. So you would see that in tribes out there, but this was the first tribe that had been encountered on the West Coast that had not only an abundance of copper, but they knew how to manipulate it. They knew how to build things with it, craft things with it. So it's super odd, and the researcher goes, how did you guys figure out the secrets of copper? Like, were you trading for it? The distance was so vast, that seemed a little weird, but the story they were about to tell was even odder. They said, no, this dude came flying down from the sky in a copper boat. And he had all this copper on him. And he taught us the secrets of copper. He taught us how to manipulate it and how to forge it and how to craft it into these beautiful things. All of the copper that you see here came from that man. And the way that we learned how to use it came from that man as well. And the researcher's writing all this down. He's like, dude, this is gold. This is fantastic. I'm going to sell 1 million copies of my book. And the researcher goes, well, okay, that's amazing. What happened to the dude? Like, did he just fly away? And the tribal leader goes, oh, no. We killed him. We killed him after he taught us all this stuff and after he gave us copper. We killed him and we disassembled his copper boat and we had more copper. And that is the origin. And the researcher's like, I hope these guys don't need paper. I have a lot of paper on me. And I've been writing in it right in front of them. So these guys could have landed in a completely different location, and that would have been the end of the story. They would have just been killed. I think a lot of places they could have landed, they would have been killed. Because that would be the safe bet. Now here's the thing, it probably wouldn't have been easy. These guys can carry logs. It wouldn't have been easy to take them on. Maybe the tribe would have lost. But my point is that they landed in a great place. They landed near a very, very friendly tribe who, while they were leery of the little men, at first they're just like, live and let live. And on the one hand, I've talked about this before on the show. I figure like stuff like this happens more often than not. Where you would have alien castaways on Earth. A ship malfunctions, something crashes, something goes wrong. A ship leaves without you, right? If you're an alien, you're on a mission. There's 7 of you doing things, and then something happens. Some farmer comes out with a shotgun and starts just laying into you. You're out collecting squirrel tails, and all of a sudden you hear these gunshots, and you see your teammates, you see your alien buddies running back aboard the UFO, and it takes off, and you're like, oh my. You're just holding a bag of squirrel tails, and you hope that they notice that you're not on board, right? They got more pressing matters. Blood's shooting out of their commander's stomach from these fresh shotgun wounds. You hopefully they figure out that they left you behind. Hopefully they come back for you, but maybe you have to stick around for a while. I've even said that could be how we get stories of some cryptids. Could actually be an alien castaway. Because some cryptids are a species. Like you would say Bigfoot. There's so many of them. They're actually a species, whether it's a biological species or an interdimensional species or what have you. That's up for debate. But things like the Jersey Devil, things like where it's just one, the Billiwhack monster, these type of things where it's just one creature living in one particular area, that might actually be closely related to something like an alien castaway. I'm not specifically saying those two are, but I think you guys know what I mean. if you have one cryptid that's in a particular area and it never really seems to leave, that might actually be an unidentified alien presence. But I'm sure that this happens. I'm sure that if you take all of the accounts of people being abducted by aliens or just seeing UFOs in the sky, what have you, you're going to have a certain percentage of mission failures. You're going to have a certain percentage of UFOs crashing, getting shot down, malfunctioning. And if you're going to malfunction anywhere, better here than, say, the moon, right? Or if you're just sailing through the gas giant Jupiter and you're like, oh man, I wish we were crash landed in Alaska right now. There's probably not many better places than you can crash land to be a castaway on Earth. And it turns out that Alaska might be the best place of all. Immensely cold. Probably not a lot of fun stuff to do up there. You fishing, if you like fishing, throwing spears at deer. That could be probably pretty entertaining, especially if you're strong enough to pick one up. You're strong enough to hurl a spear right through its neck. Come out the other side. It's a beautiful story. It's really a story of humanity at its best. They see something strange. They see something different. And they just go, let's wait and see. Right? They didn't say that they were going to be pushovers if something happened. But they didn't immediately react negatively to it as well. I think that's kind of a beautiful part of humanity. And I wonder if you went up to this village, if they have a graveyard. Because the way that the story played out, the grandmother last saw them in 1913. That's the last reported sighting of them. I wonder if, because I would assume so because they were such good neighbors, if they're buried in the local cemetery, like the native cemetery in that area, if you could actually find their gravestones. So that's your homework for today, guys. I want you guys to become grave robbers. Go to Alaska and start digging up all the graves that look like they're less than 3 feet. They're not the kid graves, though. Look at the years that they died. Look for people who lived over 100 years and dig up their grave. Maybe you'll find some alien bones. Maybe you'll find the alien bones of 3 men who crash landed on Earth, but made the best of it. Not only did they make the best of it, they found the best humans to live next to, the friendly humans. The humans willing to take the let's wait and see approach rather than the let's kill them on the spot approach. There's a lot of places you can crash in the universe, but it turns out that Alaska may be the best of them all. DeadRabbitRadio@gmail.com is going to be our email address. You can also hit us up at Facebook.com/DeadRabbitRadio. TikTok is @DeadRabbitRadio. Dead Rabbit Radio is the daily paranormal, conspiracy, and true crime podcast. You don't have to listen to it every day, but I'm glad you listened to it today. Have a great one, guys.